Okay. Give it just a moment here. Hey, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. While we're waiting here, feel free to drop a note in chat. Let us know where you guys are from today. It's nice and sunny today. I'm right outside Charlotte, North Carolina. I think it's supposed to be close to 90 degrees today, so beautiful day. Definitely appreciate you guys joining. We're just going to give it just one moment here, and then we'll get this started. While we are waiting, I do want to mention real quick, we are giving away a Ford Bronco. If you guys want to jump out real quick and go register for this, definitely recommend that. I'll speak to that here in a moment again. Okay, I guess we're just go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining. Welcome to today's, I guess, installment of Webinar Wednesday. We have Tanium joining us to discuss the power of certainty in a distributed workforce. Before we get started, again, I want to point out we are giving away a Ford Bronco to one lucky person. We just completed our last sweepstakes and actually giving away our first Ford Bronco in June. We've already finalized that down to 5 finalists, and we'll be giving that away next month. But we have started another sweepstakes, so definitely go out and register because you've got to, of course, be in it to win it. I do want to also mention that we are giving away a $100 Amazon gift card during this presentation. So make sure you stay tuned to get more information specifically around that. You may be the lucky winner of a $100 Amazon gift card. So real quick, my name is Randy Price. I'll be your host today. Kind of already mentioned for those that have joined early that I live outside Charlotte, North Carolina. I've had over 20 years of experience in the end user compute space. Been with XenTegra now for about 5 years. If you guys have ever worked with us before and engaged in one of our Citrix or VMware complimentary micro assessments, there's a good chance I worked with you guys on that. You know, so, and we'll talk about that a little later as well, what those actually entail, if that's something you guys are interested in. But, you know, for those that are not familiar with XenTegra, we are a national reseller. We invest heavily in our partnerships and the end user community. We provide expert services along with carefully selected products and customer enablement with events, workshops, and webinars such as this one. And the goal there is, you know, no matter where you are in your digital transformation journey, we can help you on your path to being successful. This is Andy Whiteside. He's our founder and CEO. Andy founded XenTegra on the principle of serving the end user community, which we continue to do today. XenTegra is a value-added reseller. We provide consulting services, no matter how big or small, you know, the client is. We also provide managed services to help support and manage your digital workspace environment. If you haven't taken advantage of one of our complimentary assessments, I kind of mentioned that a little bit ago, highly encourage you to do so. These assessments are provided at no cost for up to 4 hours. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely follow up with us after this session and we can discuss that further. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Bill from Tanium. I'll let him introduce himself as we discuss the power of certainty in a distributed workforce.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. Go ahead and get my screen shared here.
Yeah, one thing I was going to mention, as Bill's kind of going through and discussing Tanium and what they can provide, we definitely want to make this interactive, right? So if you guys have any questions, throw those in the chat. I'll be monitoring those and pose those to Bill as he's going through his presentation and demo. I'd love to hear, you know, any questions specifically that you guys may have, any comments. Like I said, just throw those in the chat and I'll bring those up.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Randy. Appreciate that. And yeah, good afternoon, everybody. And my name is Bill Walker. I'm a partner technical solutions engineering resource here at Tanium. And I'm thrilled to be spending some time with you this afternoon to talk a little bit around distributed workforce, the impact of what we've all seen over the past couple of years to the workplace, some of the problems and challenges that's created, and then we'll talk a little bit about some potential solutions. But yeah, just a really quick background on me. I started off my career at Ernst & Young doing IT operations and support for a couple of years. Spent a short amount of time at Microsoft there doing everything from support engineering through support leadership and customer success and a little bit of sales as well. And now I've been with Tanium for the past 3 years in a variety of roles. Top right, you'll see some photos of some of the things that are important to me. I've got a very competitive swimmer in the family. I'm a big fan of live music. It's one of my passions. Love cooking whenever I get the chance, and also playing poker. So again, it's a pleasure to be able to spend a little bit of time today talking about an issue that is definitely at the heart of what we're all thinking and doing at the moment. And you know, when I think about this topic of the distributed workforce, I want to start off with sort of 3 key principles today around the distributed workforce. Very popular topic, you know, going back to 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic, when everybody had to quickly react to the new realities of the world and shift into a distributed workplace kind of footing. But let's start with this first rule, which is that the rapid change that we've seen is not slowing down, even though the pandemic is easing a little bit, right? And whether we think about just the modalities of computing from IoT and OT devices, or we think about the number of vulnerabilities and attacks that are out there in the world, this pace of change is not going to slow down as we get on the other side of this pandemic. So that's an important point here, I think, as we look at the overall distributed workforce. The second point I want to mention is that the distributed workforce will remain distributed. In all likelihood, we're never going to go back to that full 100% everybody living within a headquarters walled off garden, right? We're going to continue to see employees wanting to and needing to work in remote locations. So the challenges and the problems that have been brought on by this quick pivot and focus and shift over to a distributed workforce are not going anywhere. I think that's a really important point. And then finally, many, and actually I would dare say most organizations still face critical visibility gaps. And that is that they simply don't know everything that's out there. They don't know what all they are trying to manage. So I want to jump in and talk a little bit more about the challenges that this pivot to the distributed workforce has brought to us. I then want to go into a favorite concept of mine around visibility and control. This is really the heart of sort of the Tanium platform, is this concept of being able to see everything and being able to control everything in your environment. And then finally, I'll leave off here with a couple of next steps, including a model that we use to sort of look at how to transform your organization as you're moving and pivoting towards or more towards this distributed workforce. So really, there's a core problem in our industry. And if we think about CIOs and even CISOs, they can't answer basic questions about the state of endpoints in their environment, whether that's how many endpoints do I have in total, what software is running on those endpoints, what vulnerabilities might exist on those endpoints, right? What kinds of liability am I incurring by having those endpoints in my environment? What infrastructure do my business critical services rely on? And if I make a change in my environment, what am I going to impact? And then also, are you, this is really the tough one. Are you confident making key business decisions based on the integrity of the data you're getting today? If we back out just a step and sort of look at the state of the world today for any non-Tanium customer that's out there, you've got multiple tools that are pulling in lots of different data sets, and your job then is to collate the data sets to get a semi-accurate picture of what does the world look like within your environment. That's a tough spot for anybody to start off on. And look, it's not that the CIOs don't know that these are important questions, right? The problem is just the multiple priorities that are competing with energy focus, and also just the tool set and the knowledge of how can we figure out what's going on across all of these different endpoints. Such things as overwhelmed staff, right? Lack of capacity. Just think about the licensing that's required for the VPN and how that rapidly shifted, right? Performance, these VPN networks are melting right now. If you think about the roughly 80% of employees, sometimes 90 and even 100% of employees coming in over VPN links. Not to mention the fact that we're now dealing with reverse data flows, right? Where it used to be you had a very small minority of people VPNing in to get into the corporate headquarters or corporate network, if you will. Now it's everybody coming from outside, and then those data requests are going back out to cloud services. So things have really been flipped on their heads in that way. unknown risks that are out there. I mentioned the lack of visibility, the lack of understanding of the core number of endpoints that we have. Well, that also really highlights unknown risks, right? If you don't know what's out there, you can't really make a good assessment of what kind of risk you're facing. Missing devices, right? At the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of people sent workers home with computers with no good way to manage where that computer was, what it was doing, how it was doing it, how it was operating. And then finally, we've also pivoted to where a lot of employees are bringing their own device to the scenario. And then we get into situations of not knowing if or what kind of antivirus software is installed. Is it configured correctly? Any kind of alignment to risk management frameworks is missing. And patching, my goodness, patching still is an issue today, and particularly in this remote or distributed workforce world that we're all living in. And again, if we're not patching and updating things, that's where 80% of all breaches and incidents occur. So that's a core functionality problem that exists today in this world of a distributed workforce. Now, a couple of just interesting data points I want to share with you all today. This first one is mind-blowing in my opinion. Almost, let's call it 95, let's almost call it 100% of IT decision makers are discovering unknown endpoints on a daily or weekly basis. Right. So essentially what we're saying is there's constant inaccuracy in any IT organization across the globe to understand exactly what kinds of endpoints they're dealing with, what's on their network, what do they need to manage, what do they need to take care of, where do they need to maintain and manage risk. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard this kind of a data point that since the beginning of the pandemic, general security incidents are up by 300%, right? So there's a massive increased risk. And when we couple that with that fact over there on the other side, the 94%, it's a pretty dire situation. Now, I want to pivot a little bit away from just the hardware devices. And let's also think about the software elements of this, that over 1/3 of the technology waste that's going on is in unused software licenses. So yes, we're going to talk a lot today about risk, and we're going to talk a lot about compliance, but we're also going to talk about just hard dollar reclamation from unused software. That's an incredibly important piece that is elusive to a lot of leaders in IT organizations today. A couple of other numbers here that I think are really, really important. And this 55% number, more than half of the IT organizations out there today are using more than 20 tools across IT ops and security. Let's pause on that for a second. More than 20 tools. That means that you got to have 20 different subject matter experts. You probably need 20 different pieces of hardware. You have 20 different sets of licenses to maintain. You probably have 20 different agents that are living on every single machine, regardless of if they're a top tier class computing, a nice i7 with 32 gigs of RAM, or if you got maybe perhaps some lower tier hardware, they're still going to be running all of those different agents. And that's going to end up just destroying the end user experience and the productivity of those people who are behind those endpoints. Now, moving on here, 40% of CIOs also say that data silos essentially make it difficult to identify the severity of an issue and minimize the business impact. So again, just the silos from those 20 tools, all the different data sets that are coming in, and then trying to take a large organization of IT professionals and arbitrate who's got the right data becomes a nightmare, right? Much less when you try to then pivot from discovering what the problems are to then remediation of those problems. And look, 90% of these IT leaders are saying that these data silos are creating significant problems in getting to their digital transformation outcomes that they're looking for. So again, we have a huge problem as an industry here, just in terms of the silo and the chunkiness of where all this data is coming from, how we're gathering it, the fidelity of that data, and the speed with which we're able to get it. So I want to, again, introduce you to this concept of visibility and control. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper here. And we're actually going to jump into the Tanium console just a little bit here. I'm not going to bore anybody with extensive demos here, but I do want to show a couple of points because I think it's really important to understand the power of the platform by actually seeing it with your own eyes here. But first, allow me just to introduce Tanium here. Founded in 2007 by a father-son duo who were responsible for Big Fix, which is a software solution for IT operations. And they started and ran this company for almost 20 years before selling it to IBM. So they know this domain incredibly well. They know the ins and the outs. They know the problems of this particular part of the industry. They know where the limitations are and were, right? We're roughly just over 2,000 employees with a valuation of over $9 billion. And we serve over 500 customers. ranging in endpoints anywhere from 1,000 all the way up to over 1 million, including some of the very largest networks in the world. We cover just over half of the Fortune 100, and we have a global footprint with presence in all regions and across all areas of the globe. We have some really strong partnerships here that I want to mention, including Salesforce, ServiceNow, Google. From a global solution integrator perspective, we are partnered with folks like PwC, Accenture, Verizon, Ernst & Young, EY. And then regionally, we've got great partners like XenTegra, Optiv, WWT. We are a top-rated private cloud company, and we do stand by our 2% give back pledge of our corporate profits back to charitable causes. So again, the vision here for Tanium, manage and secure anything with a chip. That's where we're headed. I think it's a noble mission, and I'm excited to talk a little bit more about kind of how that all works today. So a slightly busy slide here, but I think it's really important because this gets to the heart of the Tanium platform. This one slide here will really kind of give us a walkthrough of the principal foundational elements of it, the outcomes you can expect with the Tanium platform, as well as the solution areas where we navigate today. I'm going to start here at the very bottom of this and just talk about some of the foundational elements of this platform, leading off with this concept of extensible data sources. The ability to do ad hoc interrogation of your endpoints is really kind of at the root of what we do. That is, you can ask any question of any endpoint out there, whether that's a software-related function or a hardware-related function. Do I need to know the processor family, perhaps the operating system generation, or maybe I need to know the list of installed applications for everything. Tanium allows you to interrogate each individual endpoint and get fresh, real-time, high-fidelity data back. Now, we do this in the middle here with this distributed communications protocol, what we refer to as a linear chain technology. That's our capability to minimize network traffic by the Tanium server talking to only a single endpoint in any given subnet, passing a question to it, and then that question gets passed on along that subnet until it gets to the end of the subnet, and then comes back to the Tanium server in one single aggregated message. Now, that results in lightning fast response. I mean, response like I've never seen in my 30 years in the industry. It is incredibly quick that we get back answers from all of our individual endpoints. And we don't rely on a database. We actually go and talk live to those endpoints, get those answers, and bring them back. Now, if you contrast that with some of the legacy and incumbent vendors out there, there's a lot of relay servers in between the centralized server and the actual endpoint. With Tanium, we don't get that. We actually have those live direct conversations in real time. Super important foundational point of our architecture. And also a single lightweight agent. We mentioned earlier 20 plus tools for most IT organizations out there. Again, you think of the bloat and just the constraints that all of those agents are going to place on your fleet of endpoints. It's a significant difference. Now, real quick, I want to just jump in and just show you a little bit of what that looks like when we actually ask those questions and how quickly do we get responses back from those systems. Now, I'm going to start off just with a really basic view of this. This is the homepage for the Tanium console here, with a listing of all the different modules, and we'll cover some of these as we go through the rest of this presentation here today. But I'm going to start with a really, really simple question here. I'm going to get computer names from all machines. And I guess before I do that, let me give you a little context on the environment that we're looking at here. Roughly 1,000 endpoints, mostly virtual machines, but a mix of Linux, Windows, Mac, AIX, Solaris, all of it. But I'm just going to ask a simple question here. I'm going to say, get computer name from all machines. And when I do that, Tanium server is going to issue that question out to all the subnets it knows about. And that question is going to go around those subnets and come back. And you can see in just the time I've just been briefly talking here, we've already covered 75%, and they are 100% of the estate. Now we have all of the different computer names. I can, from here, I can actually merge additional questions on to get IP addresses, operating systems. But I just wanted to show that real quick, that brief, how quickly and how fast that capability is to sort of respond and to, in real time, interrogate those individual endpoints. Now, yes.
I just have a question. So, and you mentioned too, right, that this does not require a database on the customer's end, correct? All of this is just happening in real time.
That's correct. That is correct. And I think it's one of the unique powers of the Tanium platform is that we don't actually write this to a database that could get stale. We actually, when we ask that question, we're going to report out which endpoints were able to come, right back to me. This is what's out there that's listening right now. We do have a concept of sort of cached information that you can access. But in principle, when we're asking these questions, we want to know right now, right? We want to know exactly what's happening, because in any kind of a security incident, any kind of an IT operations situation, stale data is the death of it, right? If we don't have current information, it's nowhere near as valuable as it is to be able to talk to those endpoints in real time and get that information back.
Yeah, so you mentioned the caching, because that was going to be my next question. I actually had someone ask a question: what happens if the machine is powered off, right? So if the agent's not able to return back, how do you handle that? So it sounds like,
yeah, so we have a concept of cached here, right? So we can actually sort of change that result set to understand what have we seen, and there's a way that we can actually look at it in different time standpoints as well. We can look at the last, here's in the last registration interval. So in the last 5 minutes, this is what we've seen. But I can also change that to the last 7 days as an example. And now we're going to get that different result. So we do maintain that database, but when you're asking those questions, we're giving you that real-time data so that you get, again, the most accurate and current information that is available about your environment.
good.
Yep. So yeah, let me get into some of the outcomes up here along the top of the slide here. Visibility, control, speed, and truth are the principal outcomes that the Tanium platform delivers for you. We've already talked a lot about visibility around this concept of knowing everything now, get into every endpoint, manage or unmanaged with complete, accurate, real-time data in seconds. And again, you guys saw as I went through that literally is seconds to get to roughly 1,000 endpoints. And before anybody asks it, I've also seen this in very large corporate environments. The customers I've worked with have been north of 250, 300,000 endpoints, and it's still that same 15-second response to talk to every one of those endpoints. So that visibility is an incredible asset here for us. Control, that visibility is fantastic, but then the ability to make changes on those endpoints is also integral to sort of the power of the Tanium platform. Again, we can change registry settings. We can reboot machines. We can restart services in just that same amount of time, that same quick response. We can apply patches that quickly. Speed, obviously, is one of those core outcomes that exists across visibility and control here. But I really want to also focus on this concept of truth, the ability to align teams on a single data set. Right today, in a lot of IT, scenarios, breaches, incidents, you end up with multiple teams that are bringing different data sets to the table. So there's several jobs that immediately come up just from an administrative standpoint of collating that data and understanding what's the most current data, what's the correct data set, how do I get that integrated into all those different pieces, right? Tanium sort of gets rid of that in that it provides a workplace for both IT operations as well as security, and it's all coming from this unified data source known as all of the endpoints, right? So we're getting a constant data pump feed from the endpoints that's informing the administrator or the owner of the IT estate of exactly what's going on. So that's a critical point, though, because today a lot of solutions do not have that. They spend a lot of time simply arguing over the relevancy of an individual data point, much less once you've finally gotten to that single source of truth, if you will, how do you then remediate, right? How do you pivot into actually going and fixing that problem? That generally takes that data, or it takes a step of getting that data, extracting that, putting it into some other system, hoping it all lines up and matches well, and then beginning your process of remediation. So again, those are the core outcomes that the platform provides. Let's talk a little bit around some of these individual solution areas. Risk and compliance, as an example, a single source of truth here, to identify risks and fix them fast. You can see we've got multiple modules here that comprise this solution area for us. And I think rather than talking individual modules here, what I'd rather do is go back into the console here and go take a look at Tanium risk. Now, one of the things to notice here is that we're seeing a real-time risk score here over time. So on a daily basis, you can see how the risk for this organization is changing, given any sort of changes that you've prioritized around remediation. And we base this on these 6 risk vectors here, from system vulnerability, system compliance, administrative access, password ID, expired certificates, and insecure protocols, basically. Now we score those across any individual endpoint. You can see if I click into system vulnerability, I will see all of the endpoints. This asset criticality can be defined by the end user so that we can sort of say this series or selection of endpoints is extremely critical. Others might be high or medium or low. We can also then see the endpoint score for this individual endpoint from a risk perspective, as well as the derived score there for that. We can drill further. Yeah, I'm sorry, is there a question, Randy?
Yeah, just real quick, sorry. Can you define what an endpoint is, Tanium, and what OSs are supported?
Yeah, sure can. So let me start with the OSs that are supported are Mac, Windows, most all flavors of Linux, AIX, and Solaris. Those are the 5 principal operating systems that we support right now. We are releasing this month a MDM solution, so that we will get into the mobility space with Android and Apple devices. And then there's also some work going on around OT and IoT pieces with an integration with Forescout in the works, as well as other core development in that area. So those are the devices that we are focused on right now. And I apologize, Randy, the first part of your question.
Can you define what you guys?
What an endpoint is? Yep. Yeah, so to us, essentially, an endpoint is anything that has an interface, a way to talk into the corporate network. That's what I would define as a endpoint. An endpoint could have multiple interfaces, like a dual home server. It could still be considered as an individual endpoint. But we essentially define it as anything with a chip that is talking on the corporate network.
So not just traditional, when you think of endpoints, a lot of times, take Citrix, for example, you're speaking around the devices the end user is using, right? So are you saying you consider an endpoint to even be the backend infrastructure, the servers, anything on the network at that point?
That's correct. Yeah. So if we want to think about virtual machines as an example, we see the host, as actually, let's look at the individual endpoints, the virtual instances themselves. Those are all going to be endpoints for us. If we think about cloud instances, any sort of cloud virtual machine, again, that's going to be an endpoint for us. So anything that has an interface that we're talking to and that runs one of those operating systems. If we think of something like ESXi as an example, so that is hosting some of those virtual machines, we don't have an agent that we can apply directly to ESXi, but we can do discovery of those devices, and we can do satellite scanning of those from a compliance and vulnerability perspective as well. But again, endpoints to us is anything that is talking on that network, whether that's server, whether that's a laptop, a desktop machine, and very soon here, mobile devices, tablets, as well as IoT devices. Let me see. Actually, let's jump back and keep going through some of the solution areas here. I want to make sure we can get to these. So the next one up is client management. So really, thinking about how do we manage our endpoints for optimal peak performance, whether that's installation of software, removal of software, actual performance monitoring down to the process level, process, CPU, memory, trying to understand what's impacting our fleet from a performance perspective, as well as deep looks into each individual asset from a software and hardware perspective. Let me jump into a little bit of that. And we'll start with our performance module. And again, this is all about managing that end user experience, understanding what's occurring across any of these individual endpoints. And give me a second here as this resolves.
So Bill, I saw you guys had multiple different solutions, right? That you guys are targeting, right? Typically those are separate. A lot of customers have, very separate solutions for each one of those, but you guys have an entire platform that kind of covers all 5 of those, correct?
Yeah, so yeah, that is correct. And so these 16, 17 different modules that appear here on the homepage of our console, these are what comprise those different solution areas, right? So each solution area, if we go back to this view of it, here are all the different modules, and then each of our solution areas use some of those modules to provide an overall solution. So that's the way we kind of break it up. We really want to focus more on the solution areas than on the individual modules, right? Because that's the power of the platform, is to be able to look at these solution areas, things such as, as this risk and compliance, client management, asset discovery, inventory, threat hunting, and sensitive data monitoring. But again, all of those use some different combination of the individual modules that make up the overall Tanium platform.
Who are the other players in this space that you typically see that customers are using, right? That maybe they got various solutions kind of filling some of these gaps that you guys could encompass in an all-in-one platform.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's one that I get fairly often. And it's important to sort of walk through this, because, and this is not a cocky answer here, but I don't think there are any direct competitors to this Tanium platform approach towards visibility and control. Now, if you look at any of these individual modules, there are obviously a lot of competitors. As an example, in the compliance space, whether we're talking Tenable or Qualys, there are definitely competitors if we get into those specific module use cases. But again, what we want to turn the focus is to that overall platform, that ability to, again, have that continuity of data so that it's actionable and it's fast and that it's a common set of, or it's a common pane of glass, essentially, whether you're IT operations or security. So again, from a competitor standpoint, absolutely, as we go through some of these individual modules, there are definite competitors there. We look at deploy and patch, maybe that's Jamf on the Mac side, or it's System Center Config Manager on the Windows side. But again, you're going to be hard pressed to find any of those solutions that cover all the different operating systems and that cover everything from IT operations all the way through to the security side of the solution. Does that answer the question there, Randy?
Yes, thank you.
All right, so yeah, as we were thinking about client management, basically, what we can do here is I can directly connect to any individual endpoint here. And what I'll be able to do here is to look at, sort of the overall events that have occurred on this particular endpoint. I can look at the individual CPU metrics around that individual endpoint and what it was going through at any given moment in time. I can look at the individual process level here to see what kinds of CPU is it consuming. And furthermore, if I go back to sort of the performance homepage of this, we also do get this series of events that we can look into. As an example, I've got CPU events, system crashes, memory events, and I can drill into any of those and kind of go look at the individual endpoints that are having that particular issue, and we can look at the individual processes that then drive those particular problems and how do we go remediate those. As an example, perhaps we have, and I know we've all probably seen this kind of thing where you have multiple antivirus solutions installed on a single machine. And obviously that can cause CPU contention and a really poor user experience overall. We can pivot into our Tanium deploy module here, and we can actually go run a predefined package that says, hey, I want to go and look for any of these antivirus duplicates that are out there. I can click on that button and I can go down and target the right groups, push that package out. It's going to go and make sure that all those machines that I requested, including the entire environment, if I want to go there, let's go make sure that that antivirus.exe is removed and that only the security software.exe remains and is functional on that particular endpoint. So that's one of the sort of the capabilities that Tanium gives you from a client management perspective. Asset discovery and inventory. This, to me, is the heart and soul of the Tanium platform. And this is, again, we spoke at the top of the conversation around the visibility of what assets are out there and how most CIOs and CISOs cannot give you a definitive answer within 10, 15, 20% of how many actual endpoints they have. So let's go back into the console and take a look at how does Tanium function and answer some of those questions. This is our Discover module, and it is responsible for actively scanning every subnet where we have an agent. And now we can even do that on subnets where we don't have an agent through a satellite agent, if you will. But we can constantly scan and understand what's out there on the network. We can use ARP, Nmap, ping to understand exactly what exists all around the subnet. And what we end up with is a sort of a graph or a chart, like here, interfaces over time. Here you can see the data on the bottom axis and then the total number of interfaces that we've seen. We've divided it into categories here of managed, unmanaged, lost, and unmanageable. Starting with unmanageable, those are the things where there is no Tanium client, right? There's no Tanium agent to install. Lost are things that we have seen in the past but haven't seen in greater than, I believe it's 7 days by default. And then unmanaged, those are the interfaces that we've seen out there that are potentially manageable by Tanium, but just haven't had the agent installed yet. And then we have our managed as well. Now, if I click into this unmanaged assets here, I can get a breakdown by manufacturer. Here you can see a lot of these are unknown or are likely virtual instances. But I can get details of any of these unmanaged interfaces, what the IP address is, what kinds of labels have we already associated with it, what's the operating system, what kind of ports are open on it, how did we discover it, and when was the last time that we saw it on the network. Now, that's just a critical piece, though, is that we are running this constantly. the schedule can be configured. But again, if somebody comes in and plugs in a laptop into the corporate network somewhere, we want to know about that, right? We want to understand, hey, there's a new interface here, and alerts can be configured to be set up so that, hey, there's a new interface. What do we want to do with this? Do we want to quarantine that interface until we've authorized it and checked its compliance, or do we want to just go and let it onto the network? So that discovery function here, absolutely a key part of the Tanium platform. One of the other things that we discussed was around some of the deep asset information that is available from the Tanium platform. And so what I want to do here is I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to look at a report of all of our assets here. And again, this is now part of that database that we do maintain that makes it this experience just that much quicker to be able to go and filter out what has already registered with the Tanium server. But I can click into any of these individual devices and I can get really rich asset data here. I can get things such as the computer ID, the operating system version, how long has it been up? Is it virtual? What's the total amount of memory it's got? Let's talk about the processors and how many cores are there? What speed is it running at? Further, and importantly, I can get into installed applications here. I can see exactly what is running on any individual endpoint. I can look at the disks, network adapters. So really, really rich information here about any and all of the assets that are part of my Tanium environment. And then the other piece I want to show is I talked a little bit around application dependency mapping earlier. And I think this is another super important function, is to be able to understand what are the different pieces that are involved in any of my applications, right? And this is self-discovery. It's going out there and understanding from what ports have been called, who's talking to who. We can begin to map out an understanding of what are the different components of any given application. And then from there, we can drill in to get further rich information about where that lives. If I'm migrating assets to a data center, do I have all the right pieces moved? What kinds of things do I need to think of? So again, that mapping capability, super important for the overall health of an IT organization. Threat hunting, another super important topic in an area where Tanium really excels. And this is our capability to understand the various signals that are occurring across the network, across an IT organization or an environment. That is that we can look for things like elevation of PowerShell that may be innocuous in most cases, but when it's coupled with an unsigned binary, as an example, perhaps that's something that we want to flag up and we want to take a look at. And again, when you have that real-time communication that Tanium is offering here, you're able to see those individual points and those matches of patterns come together directly in real time and live, right? That's a huge differentiator and a massive advantage for corporations. Let's take a quick peek at that. I want to drill into a specific hypothetical scenario where I've got wind of a late-breaking zero-day vulnerability around an unsigned binary. And so what I want to do, first of all, is I want to come in and I'm going to search. What I want to do is I'm going to go ask all the endpoints to get all their running processes with a hash of that binary, right? So that we can understand, is there any tampering going on in the environment? So again, we're going to go ahead and get that from all the roughly 1,000 endpoints that are on the network. This one is a slightly more expensive question. So you can see it's a little bit slower, but we'll still get that back to 100% here within that 15 kind of second window. Now, now that I've got that list back, I'm going to filter this on service host because again, that's the intel that I've gotten. And as I'm looking at this, I can see that I've got multiple instances of service host, which makes sense with lots of different operating system families running out there. But I've got this one down here at the bottom that has a unique hash for it, which has got my spidey senses kind of up, right? And it makes me want to dig in a little bit further. So I'm going to go back to the threat response homepage. I'm going to go to our alerts section. And this is where we're recording all of those signals that I was mentioning earlier. Those things are all coming in. As you can see, it's a lot of traffic here. I've got a lot of different ways I can filter it. I can look at it from a MITRE technique standpoint. So any of the specific tactics or techniques, we can filter on that. But in this case, I'm curious about the service host. I'm sorry, not the service host piece, but the unsigned piece of this conversation here. And yep, sure enough, I've got some unsigned hits here that are emanating from Tanium signal. So Tanium signal, again, compiles what are the dangerous combinations of events you might see across your endpoints. And let's go ahead and drill in and take a look at this specific one. And you can see I get a lot of information around some of just the general summary information. the impact information here, talking about lateral movement between endpoints. This uses Active Directory groups and users to understand what kinds of lateral movement is possible based on a login to this single endpoint. As you can see, I've got some inbound impact to over 1,000 users across 31 different machines, and there's outbound impact across 10 users, 74 different machines. So really useful information to understand, okay, maybe I've got to spend some time really looking at my groups and understanding how much risk is that actually introducing into the environment here. We can get the very specific process information on what triggered this. And in this case, we can see that this is a service host running with a fairly nefarious kind of a switch here, pointing back to some server at evil.com with a grouping of red. That one now has my spidey senses from tingling to on fire, right? So I can very quickly go in here and I can quarantine that device and say, look, I need to apply a little IPsec quarantine here while we go figure out what is going on. I'm not going to do that for purposes of this demo, but that's the kind of information that we can get there. Now, from that point, let's go back over here to the overall, and let's go back to here. Now, obviously, one of the things I want to do once I've discovered that, yes, I've got an unsigned process that is launching a very suspicious looking code is, I want to, as I said, potentially quarantine it. And then I also want to communicate with my IT operations team and see what other kinds of actions we need to take to secure that endpoint. So that's just a taste of the threat hunting piece here. Actually, let's go take another deeper look into this impact here, because this is a very unique sort of piece of Tanium, is this ability to traverse all of the different users and groups within Active Directory and understand what impact is to any individual endpoint. So I can either drill into a user context, or I can go in and look at these groups and again, understand what kinds of impact are associated with the way the groups are nested there. I can go into any individual endpoint and look at all the specific users and groups. The first hop, is going to result in 17 endpoints could be compromised. Second hop looks like it goes all the way up to 57 endpoints, and so forth and so on. So that's the impact bit that is, again, very unique to Tanium, but incredibly important if you're trying to look at lateral movement across an organization. Sensitive data monitoring. In the world that we all live in now with NIST compliance and GDPR, CCPA, and lots more coming, sensitive data that lives everywhere, particularly in a distributed workforce role, understanding where that data lives, where it is, where is that exposure, and am I putting it and containing it into the right places becomes a really critical question. If we go into our Reveal module here, Reveal has the capability to go digging in through files and understand patterns and looking for things like credit card numbers or social security information and being able to provide an index of where do those files live. It can also be used to search for specific patterns. As an example, and a hypothetical here, let's say we have an employee that we suspect of potentially exfilling some very sensitive data out to a competitor. And we know that he's got access to a very specific set of files, and we've implanted this term of Better Street as part of an address to understand, is he actually taking those files and using those files, or perhaps exfiltrating those files. So again, a fairly expensive search here because we're looking at an index of all of these different files across all these different endpoints. But Tanium does have this ability to go look for that file. It is going to come back and locate that. And sure enough, here we can connect directly to this computer and then understand exactly where that lives. I can go look at this customer extract CSV. Sounds a little suspect to me. It's going to actually go out and show me, here's that Better Street example we planted in that file. I can now confirm that that employee, yep, is accessing that file. I can even understand where is it living on his machine. I could then take the further step of going into File Integrity Monitor and actually setting up a watch list to watch that directory. What kinds of things is that individual doing with that file? So let me back out of the demo world here and just talk about a handful of just some of these real cases, real results from customers who are dealing with the challenges of this distributed workforce. And I'll start with a multinational financial services company concerned with their workers installing their own personal printers to corporate assets, right? Obviously, a whole new chain of vulnerabilities could come up from that. But using Tanium, they were rapidly able to identify thousands of assets with printers installed and provide a concise and consolidated list to the IT security team, who was then able to take that information and do all of the appropriate remediation. Large professional services firm just recently completed some M&A activity and had to migrate all assets right as the pandemic hit. And they were able to migrate 1,000 new assets over before the deadline, mapped the new endpoints, and provided a complete patch management solution, which didn't exist before. A global consumer company here needed to address a security vulnerability across the Zoom messaging platform, right? At the beginning of the distributed, or of the pandemic, so to speak. That was a big problem, right? Was we had to get all employees onto a Zoom call. Well, how do you make sure that if they're using their own devices, that everybody's on the same version? So Tanium was able to identify those specific assets that were out of touch with the right version and bring everybody up to a singular version of Zoom, the most recent version that took care of that specific vulnerability, and able to apply that across 50,000 workstations within days. Finally, a government agency and mandating work for home, protocols for non-essential workers. Tanium was able to stand up what we call a Tanium zone server. That is a server that sits outside of the firewall, if you will, and is able to talk to employees, whether they're at Starbucks, sitting at home, or wherever they might be. But that gave that agency that ability to promote and continue the work that was going on before the pandemic actually interrupted their operations. So I want to go over just a couple of next steps here. And really, we've kind of broken this down into a three-step sort of operation here. And this is just a generalized framework for gaining visibility and control in a distributed workplace or distributed workforce environment. First step, developing resilience, right? Stabilizing the current environment and trying to understand, what do I need to do to adapt my existing operations? It's going to be different, obviously, for every single organization, but taking that inventory and understanding exactly what's going to be needed. How do I accelerate the time to detect and respond to a breach? Another core question, right? Thinking about what are the tools, what's going to happen, how is that workflow going to occur if there were to be a breach, even in this distributed sort of environment that we're working in. And perhaps most importantly here in our level one, how do I create a more effective working relationship between IT operations and security teams? Remember that if that relationship isn't working, we're dealing with those disparate data sets, right? And we're spending time arguing data sets and remediation plans, as opposed to actually focusing on stopping any of the threats, remediating them, and blocking them from happening again. Moving into level two, just recovering your operations. Thinking about things such as capacity, right? Do we have the right capacity given that percentage of our workforce that's working remote? What about all the tools that we need to collaborate? Are they set correctly? Do we understand the dynamics of all of those elements as we look through the entire environment? How do I keep all of these infrastructure pieces routinely updated, patched, and operating effectively? So recovering the core operations is that big second step here. And finally, just planning for the new normal, right? And I mentioned it at the top that it's been a while since we all had to scramble towards a distributed workforce, but the reality remains that we're still working in this kind of a distributed workforce environment here. So we've got to think about, what are these new normal pieces? What other things are going to change in our day-to-day operations? What are the things I've learned, and how do I leverage those learnings to continue to make things better? And then finally, I want to mention the Tanium risk assessment here. Now, this is an offering, and if you have interest in this, please contact your XenTegra representative. Reach out to me directly. Happy to get you set up with this. But this is a roughly 5 hours over 5 days. This is an assessment of a portion or all of your environment, depending on how you want to do it. It's going to give you that risk score that we looked at earlier in the demonstration for your particular environment. On top of that, you're going to get it's a roughly 25 to 30 page report that goes through every single one of these vectors and really explains from your organization's perspective, what are the machines that have exposure to Log4j? What are the machines that have critical patching issues? What are the machines that are having performance issues? All those different pieces get wrapped up into this overall assessment. It's a fantastic document that, again, gives you a numerical objective score to the risk inherent in your organization. So again, I want to thank you all for joining us today, because I really enjoyed the topic here of this distributed workforce. I hope I was able to present to you some of the core issues around the challenges that we're all facing and the solution that Tanium can bring to this environment. And again, if you've got any questions, please feel free to reach out directly to me. Here's my email address. Would love to hear from you. But again, thank you all very much for the time and attention today. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Bill. Over here. We come to the time here, I think, for the giveaway. Kathy, if you want to share your screen.
I'm going to share my screen right now. Here we go. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm going to spin the wheel and see who wins. The $100 gift card. Okay, Joseph T., you're the winner.
Oh, congratulations, Joseph.
All right.
All right.
All right, back to you.
All right. I just wanted to remind everyone again, I'll put it back up here. Definitely go out, register. We are giving away the Ford Bronco. Make sure you go to the site, register for that. Also, again, if there's any questions, if there's anything else that you guys need, or from a, if you want to dive deeper into Tanium and what they can provide, definitely reach out to us. One thing to kind of take note, or I want you guys to ponder it as we leave, how confident are you in the results or the complete and accurate picture you're getting of all your endpoints and all your assets, right? If you're not confident, definitely reach out. If you guys want to learn more about Tanium, we'd love to spend some time with you and go deeper into the technology and the platform that they're providing, again, under, with all the different pillars, if you will, and solutions that they offer. So, Bill, definitely appreciate you guys joining today. You guys are doing a lot in this space. Like you said, there's not really a competitor in this space. Individual solutions, yes, but something that can provide that overall arching picture and give you that complete view of your assets. You guys are doing a lot of great things, so appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Randy.
Yeah. With that, again, if there's any questions or anything, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you.